The millionaire was about to enter the apartment, but a voice from the stairwell stopped him. Main characters: Gray Anderson, lonely millionaire; Simon, vigilant teen; Andrew Miller, vengeful hacker; Nebula, notorious hacker. Gray Anderson, a reclusive millionaire in suburban Pennsylvania, lives in an immaculately maintained mansion that belies the emotional emptiness within. After a bitter divorce that stripped him of many of the dreams he once held dear, Gray has retreated into a monotonous existence defined by rigid schedules and solitary evenings spent amidst expensive, yet impersonal, artifacts of a life he once envisioned with hope. Each morning, he wakes before dawn to review his finances and meticulously plan his day, a ritual that provides a semblance of control in a life that feels increasingly devoid of meaning. Gray's days pass in predictable cycles. He visits his private gym, has carefully prepared meals served by a discreet staff, and spends long hours in a home office filled with state-of-the-art technology, yet no personal touch. The silence of his grand home echoes with memories of happier times and the sting of loss. Despite his immense wealth, the isolation is palpable, leaving him yearning for a connection that has long since faded into the background of his structured existence. His past, a blend of career achievements and personal failures, remains a silent reminder of choices made and opportunities lost. One chilly autumn evening, as Gray sips a single malt whiskey by a roaring fireplace, his solitude is abruptly disturbed. A soft knock on the door disrupts the stillness. Expecting perhaps a service delivery or a misplaced messenger, Gray opens the door only to find no one in sight. Instead, he discovers an unmarked, small black package resting on the doorstep. Inside, he finds a compact GPS tracker accompanied by a hastily scrawled note. The message is cryptic, hinting at secrets buried in his past and challenges waiting to be confronted. Gray's heart pounds as a mixture of dread and curiosity overwhelms him. This unexpected intrusion is unlike anything he has experienced before. As he ponders the strange occurrence, a voice from the dark corners of the neighborhood reaches his attention. Simon, a lean, resourceful, homeless teenager, known for his uncanny ability to observe what others miss, has been watching over the area. The boy's eyes, sharp and cautious, had caught sight of unusual figures lurking near Gray's property earlier that night. Though young and overlooked by most, Simon carries the weight of street wisdom and a keen sense for danger. He later finds his way to Gray's property, not as an intruder, but as an unanticipated harbinger of warning. His gravelly, yet sincere tone leaves Gray unsettled, hinting that the tracker is only the beginning of a much larger conspiracy that ties back to unresolved parts of his former life. In that singular moment, standing alone in a vast, silent mansion, Gray realizes that the meticulously ordered world he has built might be a fragile illusion. The intrusion and the stranger's warning force him to confront uncomfortable truths. His past is not entirely behind him, and the life he thought he had constructed may have hidden cracks ready to expose dangerous secrets. As the night deepens and the wind whispers around the corners of his home, Gray senses that his lonely existence is about to be upended by events far beyond his control. The call to subscribe on YouTube now serves as an ironic reminder that sometimes life's unexpected messages are best delivered through channels one never imagined. Late one cold autumn night, Gray's meticulously organized world was suddenly upended by an event that defied his expectations. It began when, deep in the quiet hours, an eerie silence was broken by subtle, almost imperceptible sounds near the perimeter of his mansion. While most nights passed in undisturbed solitude, that particular evening carried an undercurrent of tension that Gray, despite his best efforts to remain detached, could not ignore. The shadows outside his expansive property seemed to move with purpose, and the distant hum of a car engine merged with the whispering wind, a combination that set his nerves on edge. As Gray sat in his study reviewing documents from a long-forgotten meeting, the unmistakable sound of shuffling footsteps echoed through the corridor. His heart raced, and a sense of foreboding washed over him. Determined to discover the source of the disturbance, he left his study and quietly moved through the halls, each step measured and deliberate. Upon reaching the foyer, he discovered that his state-of-the-art security system had registered multiple brief interruptions, small glitches that suggested someone was interfering with its normal operation. The realization sent a chill down his spine. His sanctuary had been breached. Gray cautiously approached the main entrance and, after a few tense moments, found a small, unmarked package sitting on his pristine welcome mat. Its presence was both incongruous and menacing against the backdrop of his otherwise immaculate home. With careful deliberation, he picked up the package and inspected it under the dim light of his entryway. Inside, nestled among layers of soft, protective material, lay a compact GPS tracker. Its design was simple yet sophisticated, a device more suited for covert operations than a casual misdelivery. Attached to it was a hastily scrawled note, its message cryptic and void of any context, hinting that this was only the beginning of a much larger scheme. The discovery set off a chain reaction in Gray's mind. Memories of past incidents, small irregularities and subtle hints that something had always been amiss, suddenly converged into a singular, alarming picture. The precision of the tracker, coupled with the deliberate placement of the package, suggested that someone with intimate knowledge of his routines had orchestrated this intrusion. The thought that his life, already fraught with isolation and regret, could harbor enemies or hidden threats was almost too much to bear. Frantically, Gray activated his internal security protocols, scanning the device for any digital traces or embedded data that might reveal its origin. Every minute detail was scrutinized. The faint manufacturer's mark on the casing, the paper quality of the note, and even the style of handwriting. A hurried script that seemed to scream urgency. As he pieced together these clues, his mind raced to identify any connection to his past. Was this the work of an old adversary, or had an unknown enemy found a way into his seemingly impenetrable fortress? The very idea was inconceivable for a man who prided himself on controlling every aspect of his existence. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window panes and echoing the tumult in Gray's mind. The quiet neighborhood, usually a haven of order and predictability, now teemed with uncertainty. Every creak of the floorboards and every whisper of the wind seemed to confirm that something larger was at play, a meticulously planned act intended to shake him to his core. With his heart pounding and his mind awash in a mix of dread and determination, Gray realized that the GPS tracker was not merely a piece of stolen technology. It was a harbinger of a dangerous game that was just beginning, a puzzle he was now compelled to solve, no matter the personal cost. Gray spent the following day immersed in relentless thought, sifting through the minutiae of every detail from the previous night. The GPS tracker, now carefully secured on his desk, became both a puzzle and a painful reminder of secrets best left buried. Every etched line on the device's casing and every hurried scrawl on the note ignited memories of a life he thought he had left behind. Determined to understand the origin of this disturbing message, Gray began to reconstruct the timeline of events that had led him here. Late in the morning, while scanning through old digital files and correspondence, Gray stumbled upon a series of encrypted emails from a long-forgotten project. These messages had once connected him to a trusted colleague, Andrew Miller, whose expertise in cybersecurity had once been invaluable to their mutual ambitions. As Gray reviewed these records, an unmistakable pattern emerged. A subtle shift in tone and urgency whenever Andrew's name was mentioned. What had once been routine business communication now seemed laced with an undercurrent of resentment and unresolved conflict. The trail of digital breadcrumbs pointed directly to the past, one that involved a partnership gone awry and secrets buried beneath layers of professional success and personal betrayal. Driven by a need for clarity, Gray decided to visit the modest apartment he and Andrew had once shared in the bustling heart of Philadelphia. The city, with its blend of modernity and nostalgic grit, provided the perfect backdrop for this journey into his past. In the cramped living quarters, Gray discovered remnants of long-abandoned conversations, old photographs, half-finished notebooks, and even an outdated laptop still humming with residual data. Each artifact seemed to whisper stories of camaraderie, ambition, and a growing rift that had eventually led them down separate, darker paths. In one battered notebook, Gray found sketches of intricate digital networks, diagrams that Andrew had meticulously drawn during late-night work sessions. These illustrations were more than technical blueprints. They were symbolic representations of a hidden world, one where digital fortresses guarded secrets and every connection had the potential to betray. Gray recalled the heated debates they once had about the ethics of their work, the fine line between corporate ambition and outright cybercrime. The stakes had always been high, but it was only later that he realized the magnitude of the risks they had taken together. Haunted by these recollections, Gray began reaching out discreetly to mutual acquaintances from that era. Phone calls to old contacts, meetings in dimly lit cafes, and even coded messages exchanged over secure channels gradually painted a picture of Andrew's gradual descent into a shadowy realm of illicit activities. It wasn't just about data breaches or unauthorized access. Andrew had become consumed by a need for vengeance against those he perceived to have wronged him. The GPS tracker, Gray suspected, was not an isolated incident, but rather a calculated move in a long game of retribution. During one such conversation, an ex-colleague revealed that Andrew had once been involved in a contentious corporate scandal that had rocked their industry. The details were murky and fragmented, yet the recurring theme was clear: betrayal. The once respected figure had been publicly humiliated by a series of missteps and legal entanglements, leading him to seek a form of justice outside the conventional boundaries of the law. As the pieces slowly fell into place, Gray could not help but recognize that the man he once trusted had evolved into an adversary whose motivations were fueled by deep-seated grievances and a thirst for revenge. At the same time, memories of Simon's urgent warnings began to haunt Gray. The street-smart teenager had hinted that the tracker was merely the opening move in a broader, more dangerous plot, one that spanned years and involved more than just old professional grudges. Gray recalled Simon's grim expression and the cautious tone in his voice, suggesting that Andrew's transformation had been both radical and perilous. Each fragment of evidence now reinforced the reality that Gray's carefully curated life was intricately connected to a dark chapter he had long tried to forget. In the solitude of his study that evening, surrounded by relics of a past filled with both promise and regret, Gray meticulously pieced together every clue. Digital records, handwritten notes, and even the stylistic nuances of Andrew's former communications began to interlock, forming a coherent narrative. It became clear that Andrew had not merely drifted into the world of cybercrime by chance. He had been meticulously planning his return, using their shared history as a foundation for his schemes. The betrayal was not a relic of the past. It was an active, evolving threat poised to upend Gray's already precarious existence. As night fell over the city, Gray sat alone with the gravity of his discoveries weighing on him. The investigation into the GPS tracker had uncovered a labyrinth of interconnected motives, spanning from old business rivalries to personal vendettas. With every passing hour, the shadow of betrayal grew longer, casting doubt over everything Gray had once believed to be secure. The chapter closed on a somber note as he resolved to confront the past head-on, fully aware that in doing so he might also unearth truths that would irreparably alter the course of his life. Gray's investigation took a decisive turn as he stepped into the murky realm of the digital underworld, a labyrinthine network where information was both currency and weapon. Determined to uncover the truth behind the ominous GPS tracker and its unsettling connection to Andrew, he immersed himself in a world where every click and keystroke could reveal a hidden secret or trigger unforeseen dangers. He set up a temporary workstation in his secure study, fortified by state-of-the-art encryption and multiple layers of cybersecurity, knowing full well that one misstep could expose him to relentless adversaries lurking in the dark corners of the internet. Late into the night, Gray scoured online forums, encrypted chat rooms, and dark web marketplaces in search of any reference to the tracker or Andrew's signature digital footprint. His search led him to a notorious hacker, alias known only as Nebula, reputed for selling illicit data and coordinating underground cyber networks. Gray's initial contact with Nebula was tentative, a series of cryptic messages exchanged through a secure, anonymized channel. Nebula's responses were laced with veiled warnings and hints that Andrew's re-emergence into the cybercriminal scene was far more calculated than Gray had imagined. Each message was a puzzle piece, pointing to a broader conspiracy that bridged personal vendettas and high-stakes digital warfare. Encouraged by these revelations, Gray began piecing together evidence from disparate sources. He uncovered obscure forum threads discussing a recent surge in high-profile cyber attacks, a surge that coincided with Andrew's gradual return to the scene. One thread detailed the unauthorized breach of several financial institutions, while another referenced a leaked internal memo from a tech conglomerate subtly hinting at insider sabotage. The digital breadcrumbs were scattered across the underbelly of the internet, but Gray's persistence and technical acumen allowed him to follow the trail. His analysis revealed that the same custom-built code used in these breaches bore uncanny similarities to the encryption protocols developed during his earlier work with Andrew, a realization that sent a chill down his spine. Navigating deeper into this digital maze, Gray encountered a small, tight-knit group of hackers operating from an abandoned warehouse in a rundown industrial district. They were cautious, secretive, and deeply distrustful of outsiders. Yet, as Gray presented his evidence, a series of intercepted communications and forensic analyses linking Andrew to recent cyber activities, their collective skepticism gave way to reluctant acknowledgement. Over a clandestine meeting held in a dimly lit back room far from prying eyes, one of the group's more experienced members revealed that Andrew had not only orchestrated these breaches, but was also systematically dismantling the security frameworks of organizations he once admired. His motives, they explained, were driven by a bitter desire for retribution against a system he felt had betrayed him. Armed with this newfound understanding, Gray intensified his digital reconnaissance. He traced data packets through complex networks, following the virtual trail left by Andrew's operatives across multiple servers scattered globally. Each breakthrough brought him closer to the heart of the conspiracy, yet also exposed him to the constant risk of digital counterattacks. Hackers employed sophisticated measures to mask their identities and locations, making every step of Gray's pursuit both exhilarating and perilous. The intensity of the cyber chase left him awake for long hours, his mind racing as he sifted through logs, dissected malware signatures, and mapped out intricate digital networks that spanned continents. Amidst the chaos of code and encrypted files, Gray's thoughts often returned to Simon's urgent warnings. The street-smart teenager had intimated that the tracker was merely the opening move, a signal that the digital storm brewing around Andrew was about to engulf not only Gray's carefully ordered life, but also a wider circle of unsuspecting victims. Each piece of digital evidence now reinforced the notion that Andrew's vendetta was not confined to personal betrayal. It was a calculated, expansive campaign to rewrite the rules of trust and security in a world increasingly dependent on technology. By the time dawn began to creep over the horizon, Gray had compiled a formidable dossier of evidence linking Andrew to an intricate network of cybercrimes. With determination hardening into resolve, he understood that the digital underworld was no longer just a collection of shadowy forums and anonymous avatars. It was the battleground where his past and future would collide. Every intercepted message, every decoded fragment of data, and every clandestine meeting added layers of complexity to the truth he was desperate to unearth. In that silent pre-dawn moment, Gray realized that the pursuit of truth was as dangerous as it was inevitable, and that his journey into this perilous digital frontier had only just begun. In the cold, pre-dawn hours, Gray steeled himself for the final confrontation that would determine the course of his life. After weeks of relentless pursuit through digital mazes and shadowy networks, every piece of evidence, every intercepted message, and every whispered warning had led to this singular moment. Gray's heart pounded as he prepared to face Andrew, a man whose betrayal had not only shattered their shared past, but also ignited a dangerous vendetta that threatened to engulf both their lives. With the first light of dawn barely illuminating the city skyline, Gray left the safety of his fortified study, clutching the dossier of digital evidence that would serve as both shield and weapon in the impending showdown. Gray arranged to meet Andrew at a desolate, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Philadelphia, a neutral ground that mirrored the bleak reality of their fractured relationship. The location, once a bustling hub of industrial activity, now lay in ruins, its cold, concrete walls echoing the silent tension that filled the air. As Gray stepped inside, every sound was amplified. The echo of his own footsteps, the distant hum of a broken air conditioning unit, and even the whisper of the wind slipping through shattered windows. These sounds seemed to underscore the gravity of the confrontation about to unfold. Andrew appeared from the shadows like a specter from a troubled past, his expression hardened by years of bitterness and regret. For a long moment, the two men regarded each other in silence, each seeing in the other the reflections of choices made, trust betrayed, and paths diverged. The atmosphere was charged with unresolved emotions. What had once been a close professional relationship was now reduced to a collision of wounded pride and hardened determination. Andrew's eyes, once warm with camaraderie, now burned with a cold, calculating intensity that left no doubt. This meeting was no accidental reunion, but a carefully orchestrated reckoning. Gray began by laying out the evidence he had painstakingly gathered. He presented digital logs, encrypted communications, and detailed analyses that traced Andrew's activities from the initial breach to the more recent cyber attacks. His voice was steady, but carried the weight of personal betrayal. "You once believed we were on the same side," Gray said, his tone both accusatory and sorrowful. "Now it's clear that your path was fueled by revenge, a need to prove that the system and those who trusted you could be brought to their knees." Andrew's response was measured, his voice betraying a mix of defiance and resignation. He admitted that the betrayal he felt had driven him to extreme measures, but he maintained that his actions were a justified response to a world that had wronged him. The conversation soon escalated into a heated exchange, as each man defended his actions and denounced the other's choices. The debate was not only about digital crimes and personal vendettas, it was a clash of ideologies. Gray argued that seeking justice through personal revenge only perpetuated a cycle of destruction, while Andrew insisted that the established order was inherently corrupt, demanding radical change by any means necessary. As their words grew sharper, the surrounding silence of the warehouse seemed to absorb every syllable, magnifying the intensity of their confrontation. Amid the verbal sparring, both men were forced to confront the irreversible consequences of their decisions. Gray's carefully constructed world of order and security was in ruins, shaken by the revelation that his trusted colleague had become his fiercest adversary. Yet, even as anger and resentment flared, a glimmer of mutual understanding began to emerge, an acknowledgement that they were both victims of a larger, more impersonal system that had exploited their vulnerabilities. In a brief, charged moment of pause, Andrew's hardened facade cracked, revealing the regret and sorrow that had long been buried beneath layers of pride and bitterness. The encounter reached its climax when Gray delivered an ultimatum: end the cycle of retribution and dismantle the networks of cybercrime, or face consequences that would leave no room for further violence. With his dossier as evidence and his resolve unwavering, Gray made it clear that the resolution would not be achieved through endless conflict, but through the dismantling of a destructive legacy. In a final, somber exchange, Andrew acknowledged the truth in Gray's words. Though their confrontation would not undo the past, it opened a narrow path toward redemption, a future where accountability might finally restore a semblance of justice. As dawn fully broke over the ruined warehouse, the two men parted ways. Gray's heart was heavy, burdened by the realization that some wounds might never fully heal, but also buoyed by the hope that this encounter marked the beginning of a long overdue resolution. The confrontation had stripped away illusions and forced a reckoning with the truth. In that fragile moment between night and day, Gray understood that while the scars of betrayal would remain, they could also serve as the catalyst for rebuilding a life defined not by revenge, but by the pursuit of true, lasting change.